But, why are you okay? I was confused with John's pointless response. I thought he knew about Lisa's car accident. How could he behave like this? Even though I had contacted him, he didn't visit Lisa in the hospital and he arrived home in the morning smelling like booze. I was just confused. Well, I actually had an urgent task at work. But I had already checked with his workplace and confirmed that John hadn't been working. I let out a sigh as John still tried to lie and cover it up. Can't you even tell me the truth? I guess, of course, you can't, right? There was no way I didn't know what he'd been up to. I, armed with irrefutable proof, began my retaliation. Enough already. If you think I haven't noticed anything, you're making a big mistake. My name is Kathy Thompson. I turned 57 this year. After my first son, Brian, moved out when he got married, I was living with my husband, John. Even though I was just an ordinary housewife, an event occurred that shattered my peaceful life. The trigger was the car accident of Lisa, Brian's wife. One weekend, I received a call from Brian. Lisa's been in a car accident. When I heard the news, I felt the blood drain from my face. What should I do, Mom? Mom's car is in bad shape, too, and Lisa's still unconscious. Calm down, Brian. I'm heading to the hospital now. Can you tell me which room she's in? Brian had also just received a call from the hospital and seemed quite flustered. Despite his explanations were incoherent at first, Brian was finally got calm and I was able to get the details from him and headed to the hospital. I immediately called John while I was out. But John didn't pick up the phone no matter how many times I called, and I was puzzled. Why isn't he picking up? What on earth is he doing? I ran out of patience and decided to head to the hospital first. Upon arriving the room Brian had directed me, there were Lisa with her body covered in distressing casts and crying Brian. I knew it, but John was not there. Mom, haven't you seen Dad? Well, he's not picking up his phone. I have no idea where he could be. Huh? That's odd. I called him before I called you, and he picked up then. What? I couldn't help but gasp at Brian's words. It seemed Brian had explained the situation to John, just as he had done with me, but John had yet to arrive. What is he thinking? Could it be work or something? I don't know. He just says he's going out for a bit. I had a rough idea of what he was up to, but I let out a sigh at John's attitude, unchanged even in this emergency. I was outraged at John, who didn't answer his phone or visit the hospital room despite hearing about the accident before I did. In the end, John never showed up from the time we listened to the doctor until we left. I swear, when he gets home, I'm gonna give him a piece of my mind. Yeah, thanks for coming, Mom. I would have been panicking all day if I was alone. It's all right, this is nothing. More importantly, you need to toughen up from here on out, got it? Yeah. I'll do my best. According to the doctor, Lisa is not in life-threatening danger and should be able to leave the hospital in a few weeks. But just as I started to feel relief, I was told that Lisa has damaged seriously to her lower body and she would have to live her life in a wheelchair from that time. In addition to his regular job, Brian would have to bear the large responsibility of caring for Lisa's daily needs. I couldn't find the words to encourage him, so I just patted his hunched back. If you need anything, just call me anytime. Thanks, Mom. I'll probably need your help with a lot of things, but I'll try my best too. After seeing off a completely dejected Brian, I left too for home. I was determined to do my best to help them as much as I could, but for that, I had to have a serious talk with John. That was what I was thinking, but when I got home, John wasn't there. I checked but there were no returned calls and despite waiting until late at night, John didn't come home at all that day. What on earth is he thinking, not even calling or anything? I thought maybe he got held up at work, so I called his office just in case, but of course, there was no such thing as John being called in on the weekend. For a moment, I thought, could John have had an accident too? But I quickly shook my head. I could guess his actions easily. I sighed in exasperation, quickly decided to cut my losses, cleaned up the dinner I had prepared, and went to bed. John didn't come home until the next day. It was nearly afternoon on a Sunday, when I heard some noise at the front door and a barely standing, yet seemingly in a good mood, John staggered into the living room. Welcome back. Seems like you had a great time. Huh? What? Kathy? Why are you here? Why shouldn't I be in my own house? John, who entered humming a tune and smelling of alcohol, completely changed his expression as soon as he saw my face. His eyes wide opened, he stared at me looking pale. Even when I asked him, "Where have you been all this time?" he just panicked and didn't answer. What? You've heard from Brian, right? Lisa is paralyzed from the waist down and will live in a wheelchair. Lisa? I cut off a visibly confused John and asked him what I wanted to know. What were you doing in such a difficult time? I asked, mixed with anger. Without listening to my words, John let out a carefree voice. I heard about the car accident. Then why did you come home at this hour without even contacting us? But, why are you okay? Huh? At John's incomprehensible response, I was confused. Is he still drunk and confused? Even John seemed to not understand, and our conversation was not aligning. What did you hear from Brian? That your car was in an accident and he went to the hospital. Yeah, that's right. So? What's so strange about me being fine? Weren't you the one driving the car? Finally, in John's own words, I understood and said, "Oh, I see now." It seems that John misunderstood the news of my car accident, which he heard from a phone call with Brian, as an accident involving the car I was driving. Indeed, at that time, Lisa was the one driving my car. But I hadn't used the car yesterday as I was out for some business. I had promised to lend the car to Lisa because she wanted to borrow it. Brian was so panicked, I assumed you had a serious accident, John said. You've received calls from me, haven't you? What about that? Didn't you check? I thought Brian had used your cell phone to call me. He seemed very panicked, so I assumed he was calling multiple times because of that. The more I listened to John's explanations, the more it didn't add up, causing me to furrow my brow. It seemed odd that he would ignore a panicked Brian, knowing that there had been a serious accident, and not answer the phone. He also didn't come to the hospital, despite misunderstanding that I was the one involved in the accident. On top of that, he acted irresponsibly by going out to drink and only coming home the next afternoon. As I struggled to understand what John was thinking, he watched my face and remained silent. So, when you thought that it was not Lisa but me, your wife, who had the accident, what were you doing and where were you? I actually had an urgent task at work. I called your office too. Because you wouldn't answer your phone. There was no work for you, was there? Seeing John mumble and fumble with his words trying to lie and cover up, I sighed. Can't you even tell the truth? But, I guess you can't, can you? What are you talking about? I can clearly tell where and what you were doing yesterday. What are you talking about? I was not at the office, but at a colleague's house. Enough. If you think I haven't noticed anything, that's a big mistake. I took my phone and showed John a picture attached in an email. It was a picture taken last night when he was out. The picture clearly showed where he was, what he was doing, and who he was with. Seeing it, John's face turned pale. Why do you have such a picture? It's a convenient world, isn't it? Even husband's infidelity investigations are undertaken. That picture was part of the investigation report I received this morning from the detective I had hired. I couldn't thank the detective enough for getting in touch immediately, stating that they had finally caught John out. I've known for a long time that you've been unfaithful. No. I wasn't unfaithful. It's a misunderstanding. I knew you'd lie and claim your innocence. That's why I endured until I had clear evidence. For about half a year, I've been quietly preparing for a divorce without letting John find out. When I consulted a lawyer, they advised hiring a detective to gather solid evidence, which I did on the days I suspected John. I had wondered if it was worth it at this age, but this incident has shown me his true colors. It's said that a person's character is revealed in emergencies, and this must be it. I couldn't fathom spending even a single second more as a family with someone like him. Even though you've been very careful so far, you've made a big mistake this time. Why, after going to such lengths to cover your tracks? It just happened. I was drinking and got careless. You've been drinking with your mistress all this time, haven't you? Why, John? John, obviously uncomfortable, mumbled his words as if there was still something hard to express. I made it clear that if he continues to lie or try to deceive, it's him who'll be at a disadvantage. John then started to talk reluctantly. I thought, if you were in the hospital, I wouldn't need to sneak around anymore. And if it was an accident, there'd be insurance money and compensation from the other party. It felt like a sudden windfall, and I just ended up drinking too much. Windfall? I was rendered speechless by John's words. In other words, when he thought I had been in an accident, his first emotion was joy over the prospect of money coming in. It seems like he's been happily drinking with his mistress in anticipation of receiving insurance money and compensation. My mouth hung open in astonishment at John's utterly deplorable behavior, which far exceeded my imagination. This is what they mean by being too shocked for words. So, this was the first thing he thought of when he believed I'd been in a car accident. You're despicable, John. Listen, a man will always be a man. And yet you, older than me, you've given up on being a woman. So what? You think it's fine to have fun drinking with younger girls? You must be joking. I cannot continue to live with a man who thinks like this, let alone consider him family. He became defiant and started blaming me. Do whatever you want. But I don't want to deal with such troubles, and I've been in touch with a lawyer about divorce. Serious? Did I do something to you? I would refuse to look after a man who, rather than coming to the hospital in an emergency, betrays his wife and indulges in fun and benefits. John kept making no sense, so I've given up persuading him. With no chance of taking back his words, John finally agreed to contact a lawyer. It may have been a heated argument, but finally, I felt freed from the hardship and patience I'd endured until now. Well, now that we're divorced, you need to leave this house. Fine, I'll do that. Keep in mind that I don't have any money to divide with you. What? I thought I was going to get some money thanks to you, so I spent a lot. How can I split what's not there? John said this, grinning unabashedly. I was amazed that he could be even more despicable when showing his true character. I've got clear evidence now, and above all, I've no more affection for John, who valued money over his spouse's safety. I wanted to hit him with the harsh reality. It's all your fault. You've made a mess of my life, John. What? You don't need to say that much. You've been unfaithful, and I totally waste my time because of you. I've confessed everything and apologized, so it should be okay. What are you talking about? I haven't heard any proper apology from you yet. I was not sure if he's really believed that or is just confused, but either way, he should respect people more. As John looked at me with an annoyed face, I didn't feel like arguing with him. John tried to say something, but I cut off it, saying, "From now on, let's communicate through lawyers." Nevertheless, John started with some irritating excuses. I raised my voice. Enough. You can't just do as you please anymore. The conversation was going nowhere, so I decided to retreat to a hotel for the time being. While there, I took the opportunity to explain the situation to Brian over the phone, and told him about my plans for a divorce. Brian was left speechless by John's outrageous behavior. I was hesitant to involve Lisa, but Brian seemed to scorn his father even more than I did. "Mom, come stay with us once things settle down." What? You're leaving the house, right? If you haven't decided where to go, you're more than welcome to stay with us. But what about Lisa? All the more reason. We'd feel stronger with you around. I'd have to discuss with Lisa as well, but I ended up deciding to impose upon Brian and his wife. Thinking about the future was rather depressing, but Brian's words gave me the courage to fight against John once again. Days later, when we involved a lawyer and got an explanation about the divorce process and the division of property, John couldn't say a word. His attitude was clearly different from when he was talking to me, but I wasn't surprised considering John's weakness for authority and titles. So, that concludes my explanation. Do you have anything else to discuss? No. Nothing. I sighed in relief, thinking I should have done this from the beginning, as everything finally came to an end. As John had said, our savings had been used up and there was hardly anything left to split. Therefore, I decided to take home items as a small supplement. However, upon seeing the moving company enter the house, whom I had arranged to coincide with my lawyer's departure, John tried to hinder me until the very end. Hey, you're taking that much? What's gonna happen to my life? Hey, you can't complain. We've discussed through the lawyer. We used those things as a family, I have rights too. You're the one who betrayed this family, don't you get it yet? As our possessions, large and small, were carried out, the house began to feel more spacious. Seeing this, John seemed to panic, worried about his future livelihood, and started to complain. He was particularly noisy when they were about to take away expensive items, like the microwave and refrigerator, that had just been replaced. I paid for those. I have the right to use them. Don't just take them away. I paid for half of them. Besides, you can't even cook, they would be wasted on you. John, who could barely prepare frozen food to be heated in the microwave, wouldn't use these things even if we left them. I've taken these items to use with Brian and Lisa would be more meaningful, so I took all the kitchen items. John was a pain, clinging on to the end. I knew he wouldn't easily agree to a divorce, as he was inherently incompetent at life. It was only when the last piece of luggage was carried out and I was about to leave the house that I finally heard an apology from John. Kathy, I'm sorry. I see. I intended to separate my home life with you from my love life with my mistress. I see. I wanted to leave as quickly as possible, repeating my lackluster responses, but John started saying things like, I really don't want a divorce, I don't want to split up. You must be kidding. No matter what you say now, we can't go back to how things were. Then at least, could you come over to cook? Pardon? She can't cook, so there's no way we can live together. I was flabbergasted by John's words until the very end. Why did I ever live with such a man? Feeling that way, I sighed again. Of course, I couldn't entertain such nonsense, so I left the house without saying a word. About a month after the divorce was finalized. While supporting Lisa's life, I was living a challenging yet enjoyable cohabiting life. My ex-husband, John, came to our house. Brian, surprised at the sight of him through the window, said he was going to the door while trying to hide behind me. While Lisa and I were quietly listening from the living room, we heard the following conversation. Brian, how have you been? Getting along with Lisa? Thanks to you, life without you is very enjoyable. Don't say that, your dad's had a hard time, too. I couldn't help but frown and exchanged glances with Lisa at John's audacious remarks. It seemed that his mistress cheated on him and ran away because he couldn't take care of himself without me. John, having lost all his reliable contacts, appeared to have visited us out of desperation. Friends and relatives who knew the reason for our divorce would naturally not assist him. He seemed to be struggling a lot, unable to survive by himself. But of course, Brian, who knew the situation well, wouldn't accept John. Relentless, John kept saying absurd things like, I now understand the feelings of those who have been cheated on. And I apologize, I want us to get back together. You have Lisa and Kathy, don't you? I'm all alone. I want to live together as a family again. Stop joking around. It's your own fault for betraying the family and losing trust. Excuse me, can I say something? It seemed that Lisa, who had been listening with me, couldn't stand it anymore and went to the entrance in her wheelchair. John, looking somehow pleased, was abruptly told by Lisa. I understand your situation. Actually, my mom also got into a traffic accident and she needs care. What? My legs are like this and it's too much for Brian to support two people. So, we don't have the capacity to take care of you. Is that so? Lisa seemed to have deliberately lied to drive John away. Assuming John, who disliked dealing with trouble, it should work effectively, and I couldn't help but grin at her quick thinking. However, John responded in a way that was beyond our imagination. While barely managing his own life, John's eyes lit up. Really, he said, grinning slyly and letting these words slip out of his mouth. Well, anyway, let's put Kathy in a nursing home with insurance money or something. Then we could live together. He raised his voice as if to say it was a really good idea. Brian and the others froze, unable to say anything. I covered my face with both hands. You clearly haven't learned anything, you fool. What, Kathy? You're here, aren't you? Duped us again, didn't you? What do you mean duped? Shut up and listen, all you do is make shameless remarks. Stay out of our lives from now on. I yelled at him with a red face and drove John away. Whether he was surprised by my fierce look, even John quickly withdrew with a grimace on his face. I looked back at Brian and the others, gasping for breath. We forced a bitter smile at each other, as if after a storm had passed. I hope he won't come again. Was he always like that? I feel like we suddenly can't communicate anymore. I don't want to deal with him ever again. Some time passed again. Without any more onslaughts from John, we heard rumors that he had to go and live quite far for work. Having regained a peaceful life, I've continued to live modestly and joyfully with Brian and his wife. We've renovated the house to be more wheelchair-friendly. Lisa's rehab went well, and although it was slow, she recovered enough to walk without a wheelchair. It was a recovery so miraculous, even the doctors were surprised. Once I can walk more, I'll take care of you, Kathy. Thanks, but you're getting ahead of yourself. I'm still going strong. Lisa's scars, which were said to possibly remain after the accident, are now completely healed. Once she's recovered more, we've set a goal of going on a trip as a group of 3. We plan to go to a famous national park that Lisa has been wanting to visit, probably something like Yellowstone. With a goal in mind, Lisa's motivation has skyrocketed. While supporting her dedicatedly with Brian, we are leading a lively life. This is a very ordinary and healthy family, and it is also my happiness.